Good morning, y'all. I want to have a different kind of conversation with you this morning than the one I usually have when a heat wave is in the forecast. I cover heat events on this channel the way I cover severe thunderstorms and tornadoes, with the atmospheric science, the pressure maps, the temperature anomaly charts, the heat risk levels from the Weather Prediction Center. And I am going to tell you right now that another round of dangerous heat is coming, and I will give you all of that data. But this morning I want to start somewhere different. I want to start with the people, because the number that I think about most when I sit down to cover a heat event is not the heat index peak or the record low overnight temperature. It is the number of people who died. And in the summer of 2026, that number is already real and documented and still growing. And another round of heat is coming that is going to add to it. And I think every community in the path of that next round deserves to hear the human story clearly before I give them the science, because the science only matters if the people reading it understand what it is actually describing. The deaths that have already happened. The number we have to sit with. Let me start with what we know has already happened in this summer's heat, because the numbers are real and they need to be said plainly. The first heat dome of 2026, the one that peaked around the 4th of July weekend across the central and eastern United States, has been linked to 44 deaths. 44 people in the United States are confirmed to have died from this heat event. In New Jersey alone, officials were investigating at least 29 possibly heat-related deaths, finding people dead in homes without air conditioning or on the street during the peak of the event. Those deaths ranged in age from people in their 30s to people in their 80s. Not all of them were elderly. Not all of them were homeless. Some of them were working-age adults who simply did not have adequate access to cooling when temperatures refused to drop below 80 degrees overnight, and their bodies could not manage the accumulated thermal stress. Across the Atlantic, the European heat wave that ran simultaneously with the American event produced approximately 1,000 excess deaths in France alone. 1,000 people in a single country over the course of a single heat event. French officials confirmed those numbers. And the World Weather Attribution Scientific Network, the Rapid Attribution Research Group that analyzes the role of climate change in individual weather events, published their assessment this month. The intensity of the heat and humidity that struck the United States and Europe simultaneously would have been virtually impossible without the effects of fossil fuel-driven warming of the planet. I'm not stating that to make a political argument. I'm stating it because it is the scientific consensus of the people who study this professionally, because it is relevant context for understanding why extreme heat events are becoming more frequent and more intense, and because it is honest. And honesty is all I have ever offered on this channel. Now another round of dangerous heat is coming, and the people who died in the first round are not coming back. But the people who are still alive, who have survived 2 weeks of extreme heat already, who are tired and heat-stressed and depleted, and possibly running out of the kind of patience and caution that keeping yourself safe in a sustained heat event requires, those people are the ones who need to hear what I'm about to tell them before the next round arrives. How heat kills, the physiology that every American needs to understand. Y'all, I want to explain the physiology of heat death in plain language because I think the way heat illness is discussed publicly dramatically undersells how fast and how completely it can overwhelm a person, and that underselling contributes to the decisions that result in deaths. The human body works extremely hard to maintain its core temperature within a narrow range, approximately 97 to 99 degrees Fahrenheit. It does this primarily through sweating. Sweat evaporates from the skin surface, and that evaporation carries heat away from the body. It is a remarkably effective cooling system under the right conditions. Conditions where the air around the skin can absorb the water vapor that the sweat evaporation produces. The right conditions are conditions where the air is not already saturated with moisture. When the dew point temperature, the measure of how much water vapor is in the air, is in the upper 60s to mid 70s, the air is close to saturated. Sweat does not evaporate efficiently because there is almost nowhere for the water vapor to go. The body's cooling system runs at reduced capacity, and the core temperature begins to rise. When core temperature reaches 104 degrees Fahrenheit, the brain begins to fail. Judgment is impaired. The ability to recognize that something is catastrophically wrong is impaired. The instinct to call for help, to move to shade, to drink water, all of it gets compromised precisely when it is most needed. This is why heat stroke is so lethal. The victim often does not know they are dying until it is too late to do anything about it. The overnight low temperature story that this heat pattern keeps generating, 2/3 of the records being broken in the current event, are overnight low temperature records, with cities like Fort Lauderdale, Miami, Tampa, Galveston, and Charleston not dropping below 80 degrees Fahrenheit overnight. Is the physiology story expressed as a number? When the overnight temperature is 80 degrees and the dew point is 75 degrees, a person in a home without air conditioning who went to sleep with a core body temperature slightly elevated from the day's heat does not recover overnight. They wake up the next morning already behind, and the next afternoon's heat arrives on top of a body that is already compromised. By day 5 or 6 of that cumulative pattern, the heat illness threshold drops dramatically, even for people who are not elderly, not very young, and not medically fragile. This is why the NWS meteorologist Josh Adams said this week, and I want to make sure you hear these exact words: "Nights can be just as dangerous as days." That is not a figure of speech. That is a physiological truth that has been confirmed in every heat mortality study that has ever been done. The people, in the greatest danger, the stories that humanize the data. Y'all, let me put faces on the data because I think the specific human stories from this heat event tell something that the aggregate numbers do not. In Bloomington, Minnesota, a city in the northern plains that is experiencing one of the strongest heat domes to affect the region in 25 years, a woman named Tynica Smith has been going to encampments of homeless people in her city and handing out frozen towels and washcloths along with battery-operated fans. Let that image sit with you for a moment. A private citizen with a cooler full of frozen towels going tent to tent through a homeless encampment in the middle of a dangerous heat event because she understands something important. The people in those tents have no cooling centers to go to on their own. They have no transportation. They have no phone to call for help if their body temperature starts climbing. And without someone like Tynica Smith showing up with a frozen towel, some of them might not survive the afternoon. That story is happening in every American city that is in a heat wave right now, and it is going to happen again in every city that is in the next round. The Tynica Smiths of this country cannot be everywhere, which is why the rest of us need to be the Tynica Smith for the people nearest to us. The elderly neighbor who lives alone, the person camping under the overpass, the outdoor worker who does not feel empowered to stop and rest when their employer has not explicitly said it is okay. The outdoor heat worker death story is one that does not get told enough. Construction workers, roofers, agricultural workers, and utility workers make up a disproportionate share of heat-related deaths in American occupational health records. OSHA has federal standards requiring water, rest, and shade for outdoor workers in heat. But enforcement is uneven, and workers who are paid hourly or by the job often feel economic pressure to push through conditions that their bodies are telling them to stop in. Another round of dangerous heat is another round of risk for those workers, accumulated on top of the weeks of heat they have already been working through. The communities that need to hear this the most. Let me be specific about the communities that the next round of dangerous heat is going to target, because the geography matters, and I want the people in the highest risk areas to know they are in the crosshairs. The Southern Plains, Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas are going to be in the next heat round's core corridor. These are communities that have already been hit by the first heat dome and are now facing the rebuild of the ridge that brings the heat back. The overnight temperatures in Dallas and Oklahoma City and Wichita do not drop to comfortable levels between heat events. When the ridge rebuilds this quickly, the cumulative stress on those communities is extraordinary. The Mississippi Valley and Deep South, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, are in the secondary corridor where the heat index values that will accompany the next round are going to make outdoor conditions dangerous to anyone without access to cooling. Heat index values of 105 to 114 degrees Fahrenheit, the range the NWS has been documenting across the South this summer, represent conditions where heat cramps and heat exhaustion are likely and heat stroke is possible with prolonged exposure. The NWS does not use that language casually. And the Southeast Coast, Fort Lauderdale, Miami, Tampa, Charleston, where the NWS has already confirmed overnight lows not dropping below 80 degrees Fahrenheit. Those communities are in the deepest cumulative physiological hole of anyone in the country right now, because they have had the least overnight recovery of any populated region under this pattern. The heat safety actions that actually save lives. Y'all, let me close with the specific heat safety actions that the research says actually prevent deaths. Not the generic advice you see on a pamphlet, but the specific evidence-based actions that make the difference between a heat event that claims lives and one that does not. Check on vulnerable people before the heat peaks, not after. The people who die in heat events are often found hours or days after their deaths because nobody checked on them during the critical period. A phone call, a knock on the door, a text message to the elderly neighbor, the relative who lives alone. That 5-minute investment of time has prevented heat deaths in every well-documented community intervention study that has ever been done. Know the signs of heat stroke versus heat exhaustion, and understand the difference between them. Heat exhaustion, heavy sweating, weakness, cool, pale, clammy skin, nausea, dizziness, is serious but treatable with cooling and hydration. Heat stroke, hot red skin, rapid strong pulse, possible unconsciousness, possible lack of sweating, is a medical emergency. Call 911 immediately. Do not try to treat heat stroke at home while you wait to see if it improves. It will not improve without medical intervention. Know where your community's cooling centers are before you need one. Every county in the United States that is under a heat advisory has designated public cooling centers, libraries, community centers, malls, or recreation centers, and where anyone can go for free to cool down. If you do not know where yours is, look it up right now while the internet is still accessible and you are not in a heat emergency. Drink water continuously throughout the day, before you feel thirsty. Heat researchers are consistent. Thirst during extreme heat means you are already mildly dehydrated. The goal is to stay ahead of dehydration, not to respond to it. And set up y'all call, because this next heat round is going to produce severe thunderstorm and tornado activity along the heat dome's periphery during the overnight and early morning hours. A direct phone call to your number when a tornado warning covers your exact location is the same kind of protection that keeps people safe in every overnight severe weather event this channel has ever covered. $14.95 for a full year. Y'all, 44 Americans have already died in this summer's first heat dome. 29 possibly heat-related deaths in New Jersey alone. 1,000 excess deaths in France during the simultaneous European heat wave. And another round of dangerous heat is coming, targeting the southern plains, the Mississippi Valley, and the southeast that are still carrying the accumulated physiological burden of the heat they have already lived through. The science of heat mortality is clear. The overnight low temperature records being broken right now, 2/3 of all the records falling in this event are overnight records, tell you exactly what is happening to the bodies of the most vulnerable people in those communities. They are not recovering. And when the next round arrives on top of that, the margin between heat exhaustion and heat stroke, between heat stroke and death, narrows. Check on your people, know the signs, drink your water, know your cooling centers, set up y'all call. And share this video with everyone you love who is in the path of what is coming. I love y'all. Stay safe out there.